so today's first session, what is IBL, Inquiry-Based Learning, with John Oakes. It's going to begin at 9:10 Central Time. The presentation will take place in this room, so sit tight and we'll get started shortly. In the meantime, feel free to visit the conference website for a complete list of today's concurrent sessions and their descriptions. Don't forget to swing by our virtual exhibit booth to say hello to the Hawks team and be entered in to win your choice of an Apple Pencil, Amazon Fire Stick, or a $100 Amazon gift card. View the chat for the direct links, and I will go ahead and hand it over to John.
Oh, yes. Hi, everyone. Let me see. So I am, I'm going to just paste the link to the slides for today in the chat so that you have them, but I'll certainly share my screen, but I will say that they are interactive slides. And so if you don't, well, actually, I don't know if it would be easier, but sometimes some people aren't able to open things on their computers. And so it might be easier for you to just be able to see them on the screen in case you can't open the link for whatever reason. So when you click on the link that's in the chat, you should be taken to a screen like this, and then from here, my Zoom window actually moved to the bottom of my screen, so even my own face is halfway cut off. So that's what's going on at the moment. So how am I feeling today? Probably not good because my face is halfway cut off. And so then from here, you'll all be given an avatar, an animal of some sort, and then I will advance the slides as we go. So if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt, or use, let me see, I do this with my students all the time. So if you really want to get my attention, I guess, oh, you know what, the taco reaction is turned off on this instance of Zoom. So usually a party or a wow or something like that gets my attention, but usually I tell my students to just give random reactions like taco or their favorite bicycle that they see on the reaction menu. And I feel like that gets their attention more than anything else. So I will say that, again, my name is John Oakes, and I'm from Macomb Community College in Warren, Michigan. And I wouldn't even be here today talking about IBL and inquiry-based learning if it weren't for the AIBL and my college being so generous in sending me to one of the AIBL in-person workshops way back in what seems like a lifetime ago in 2019. And I will say that after 1 week in Los Angeles at a in-person conference there or workshop on IBL, that I made some lifelong friends that I still talk with a couple years later now about IBL, what's going on in our classes, sharing ideas. So I would highly recommend going to one of the workshops, even the virtual ones. I think that they are planning for next summer, and hopefully some in-person options again. So that's how I ended up here, is from the generosity of my college. And if you don't know me at all, then you probably don't know that I'm a big Pistons fan. And when the Pistons finally didn't get ripped off and got the first pick this year. They had a party at the Little Caesars Arena, and I got to stand in front of this new sort of art piece of artwork that they have in the arena. And then I really do love street art and going to art fairs and festivals. And one of the festivals I went to last at the end of last month, around Labor Day weekend, I saw this weird sort of street art that was painted next to a dumpster, and the couch was part of the art installation. So I just took a few photos next to the couch, on the couch, by the couch. And then all of a sudden, when I walked away, there was a line of 12 people trying to take a picture next to it. So I don't know if I'm a trendsetter or what, but here I am. And then I am adopted from South Korea. And last weekend, I was actually in New York City, and one of my best Korean adopted friends, we had never met in person before, but this was actually, I think, another example of the power of the internet and Facebook and social media, that there are some Korean adoptee groups. And so I got to meet my friend Megan in person, and she painted me that picture right there that you see me holding. And I have it hanging on the wall over there, and you can't see it, but there, but I will say that if this presentation was next week, you would see a totally different background, because I bought a big backdrop stand, but the first background I bought for some reason was a big red brick wall. So I think my students will be quite surprised next week when my background changes. But I do want you, though, since I didn't see the results earlier from what you entered, just circle how you're feeling. And then if you're not feeling very well, that's okay. Hopefully this presentation here will cheer you up, and then you'll be on your way for the rest of a great day of sessions, hopefully. And then what I can do is, now I was actually going to, yeah, so let's see. So, oh, you know what? I really need to just honestly just share screen 2 instead of that actual window. So I can do that. Okay. So if you saw something different, that's why. So I'm going to just show what some of you circled. So happy, great, happy. Is that a mustache? I'm not sure what that is. And then well, at least, that's sort of a black eye, maybe. So, I mean, that's not, maybe that's halfway toward feeling sad if that happened to you. And then there's some of what you said. So hopefully this means that this will be a good presentation, a good day for you, since no one chose unhappy. So then what I would like to know, though, is what do you want to know about IBL, or what do you want to know about inquiry-based learning? So I'll give you a couple of seconds, more than a couple, maybe like 30, no, 35, 36, just a few seconds to just go ahead and then type in what you want to know. If you know nothing and you want to say, I want to know everything, that's fine. If you feel like you're somebody who doesn't care and you want to say, I don't know anything and I don't want to know anything, that's fine. Sometimes just, if you don't want to know, you just don't want to know. And maybe I can change your mind by the end of the session today, and maybe you'll want to know something. Who knows? And so then I am going to, though, after I see that people have, oh, well, so what got me excited about this, Steve, I will say that what got me really excited is the fact that I I was I was tired of doing the things I was doing, so I was getting bored. So I was like, if I'm getting bored, the students are going to get bored. So I want to switch it up. And since this format is a little bit more interactive and the students get a chance to really dig deeper into what they are learning with me as a guide there to make sure they're not going too far off track, then I feel like what they are learning and what they get out of my classes is definitely a lot more. So let's see. So let's see what some of you said. So how can it be used with remedial and or non-STEM students? So I will say that this is one thing I'll briefly mention, but the IBL methods can be used for any level of student, any class, and there are so many varieties of IBL because of the fact that there are such different classroom environments and teaching environments and different environments at different institutions. So are you able to cover the same amount of content as in direct instruction? I I will say that my experience on that one is absolutely not, but at the same time I absolutely don't care because IBL gives my students the ability to go and learn things outside of class on their own. So I feel like a lot of times with IBL, and since I've started it, I just say, well, this particular topic I won't have time for in class, but you've learned all of this types of critical thinking skills that you need to investigate and then read through the book, talk with your group members in and out of class, and then I tell them at the beginning of the next class, we're going to take the first 10 minutes out of class and I'm going to give you a short lightning quiz or something we do as a group discussion to go over your reading about a topic we didn't have time to cover in class. And so, yeah, the amount of actual time in class on each topic is probably not as evenly distributed. It definitely isn't, but everything is still there in the course in some form. And then let's see. Oh, yeah. Do you have to completely revamp everything you're doing to do IBL? Absolutely not. You're probably doing IBL already and you don't even realize it. So we'll talk about that. And what's an easy first step? I would say an easy first step would be to just pick one topic or one lesson that you absolutely wish could be different or something that's a very dry topic and start with that first, and one lesson at a time, one semester at a time. I You'll definitely build up your library of resources quickly. And then where to find resources, I'll actually in the slides provide a list of websites that you can go to and links you can go to find resources, and then how to mitigate or account for social anxiety. That is actually one of the big pillars of IBL is equity, and how do we ensure as instructors that every student actually is engaged, is involved, and that we do activities where if a student isn't as comfortable in a situation, then they will have a different option available. So I do think that that is a very important part of IBL. So, oh, yes, I factoring is one of those topics. I'm telling you, like I really will say that factoring is one of those topics where I I know that I've tried so many different things, but honestly, like I feel like IBL methods have helped me quite a lot because as I've been telling my own students to question things that they're told, I've been questioning things myself. And so a thing that came up a couple of summers ago is, well, why can't we find the determinant of a non-square matrix? And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's interesting. So then I started poking around, and now I found a research paper from I don't know how long ago, but no, it was recent for sure. But it's about finding determinants of non-square matrices, and there we go. I tell students, well, you know what, like if you are hearing something that you're not sure about, go and question it, go investigate it, and then you're probably going to learn quite a lot more. Oh, and another interesting one is the synthetic division of polynomials. I know that every book I've seen, every resource I've seen says that the divisor must be of the form x minus c. And then I thought, you know what, that doesn't seem quite right to me. And sure enough, on some obscure website, I saw a method for using synthetic division for dividing any two any two polynomials. And so that's what I teach to my class now. And I tell them, you know what, your textbook is all lies because it's saying that you can only divide by a polynomial of the form x minus c, and that's not right. So you need to question everything that you see. And that's the basis of inquiry-based learning right there. Question authority, I guess. So I never thought I would think of it like that, but that is the way that it is. So anyway, if you want to know about the synthetic division, if you haven't heard about it, I can tell you, but I will tell you it's definitely very interesting. And it I will say quickly changes students' minds about the topics, because they're like, oh well, wait a second, if that's something that's not true in the book, what else isn't true? And so I'll tell you, this is how I know that my students are paying attention and that IBL is working the way that I want, or I'm getting better outcomes. I've had one of my Calc 3 students send me 2 typos in the OpenStax book already this semester. And so they're reading the book more, they're getting engaged with the material. And so I'm absolutely thrilled by my use of IBL. So then if you have any question, feel free to ask or put them in the chat either way, or somehow get my attention. So then I did mention that there are different forms of IBL. And so one of them is students are working in small groups during class most of the time. So that would be each group working individually, and then the teacher sort of goes around and checks in on the groups, and that is something that could be done in the virtual setting with breakout rooms or however else you want to go about that. And then sometimes students might work in small groups, but also have carefully led whole class discussions. And so that is a different form. So some instructors might have small groups most of the time, almost all the time, but some instructors might use this different mix of sometimes having whole class discussions, or sometimes students will be asked to work in small groups in and out of class, and then sometimes present at the board or in front of the class, give a small PowerPoint presentation, whatever it might be. But I think that the biggest thing is the peer review of the presentations and the students getting to hear from each other feedback about their presentations. And I will say that last winter in my differential equations class, like I did a presentation day, and the students loved it so much that the evaluations at the end of the semester said that I should do it again every semester. So I started doing that with my other classes, all of them this semester, where they're going to have a presentation day where each of them has to do a 5-minute presentation and really get feedback from their peers and things like that. And I I tell my students, you know what, it might be nerve-wracking at first, but you're going to get some skills that you can use outside of this class also. So you're going to get speaking skills, writing skills, preparing for a presentation. So that's sort of one thing that I also will say, is that by using IBL methods and helping students with the soft skills and that type of thing as well, they're going to feel like they're getting more out of the class, and that's meaningful. And I've had feedback from some of my former students that said, I wish that my teachers would have done this or this or this, and it's usually referencing a lot of these type of skills. So I just briefly, like, why are there so many different forms of IBL, and why might IBL look different in different classrooms or at different institutions or for different instructors? And it is about all of these things: the student goals and needs, whether you're teaching a developmental math class or a really like high level calculus, differential equations, STEM class, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter the topic, you can still use IBL, but it might look a little bit different depending on also the classroom layout, the class size, your comfortability as an instructor, your experience using IBL, which is why I also said just start with one lesson at a time and build your library of lessons, because until you get the experience using IBL, it could easily become a disaster, and that's the last thing that you want. So I will say, though, as an instructor, the positive reinforcement from the students actually is good for me too. So when I have a great IBL lesson, I'm like, well, you know what? That's great. I'm going to do another one. So start small, make sure it's good the first time, and then go from there. And be upfront with your students and tell them, we're going to try something new, and it might not work the way that I want it to work. And I love your feedback for improvement. And the students really like that when you ask them those types of things as well. So then what I will say is what I want you to do next, and this will be actually in the chat box. So I I got this from the AIBL, and I use this technique all the time with my classes now. And for some reason, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. I really don't think that students are going to listen and follow these instructions to do this 3, 2, 1 go in a virtual environment. And sure enough, I I did it the first time and 30 some responses came in at once, and my computer almost crashed because of it. So so if you tell the students the correct instructions and you tell them this is what we're doing something new, the students will follow along and play along with what you want them to do or what you ask of them. So on the next slide, I'm going to give you some examples of things that fall under what's considered a big tent IBL that encompasses all of these different reasons why there are different types or versions of IBL and what they might look like at different institutions or in different classrooms. And what I want you to do is look at the list, think about your own classes or what you've observed as an instructor or even as a student of what some of your own instructors may have done, and then list a method of IBL that's not going to be listed on the next slide and type it in the chat. And then when I say go, then hit enter so that everyone can see your answer. So type your suggestion or your observation in the chat, and then when I say go, hit enter. So these are some of the different varieties of IBL: whole class discussion, practicing problems, generating definition, think, pair, share, all proofs or no proofs, presentation, reflective writing, and group work. So if there's something that you do that gets the students involved in some way, whether it's something that is for a larger class where it's a whole class discussion because doing breakout rooms or breakout groups might not be feasible, or if it's just giving students some time to think about their answer before reviewing it, like just anything that is a little bit of a pause so that students can think and catch up and reflect, anything like that. Even the smallest thing could be considered something under this big tent IBL idea. So, all right. Now, I want you to go ahead and hit enter on the chat, and then let's see what all of you had for your ideas of what is IBL. So let's see. So now I will tell you, this is what I suspect it might happen, because you're mostly a group of teachers here, is that only 2 people's responses came up right away. So that's probably means that you were off doing something else and came back and were like, oh no, I have to hit enter now. I mean, that's what I understand. So let's see. So I will do the same thing that I do in my classes. I go and I sort of type out what the different responses were here, and then I go ahead and I that's not that, that's a link to the that's a link to the slide. So I don't know why it's doing this to me today, but that's okay. That's really okay. But so there's elevator pitches, and that's actually something that I I guess I haven't thought about doing that. I've I just like I do though, I guess do something where I tell my students I do another thing that I started during the whole pandemic to replace my weekly quizzes. I have my students do a weekly self-assessment now. So if you want the weekly self-assessment, just ask me and I'll send it to you. It's 6 questions long, and every week they have to explain in 2 words how they would describe their effort for the week, and then describe something that they learned each week, and then in a way that as they would explain it to, say, like a friend who missed class, like explain it in plain English, and then explain what they're going to do to improve for the next week. And then there's also something where I ask them to, let's see, describe something that they want to have as a goal for themselves for the next week. And what I will say is that what I found is one of the things that I absolutely hate about quizzes is that some students might actually come into your classes and they know some stuff from previous classes. And so then I don't know if they got the 6 questions correct on the quiz because they learned something, or if they already knew it before they came into the class. So then I want them to, on these 6 questions on the self-assessment, tell me something new they learned that they didn't know before taking my class. And so if they can't do that and explain it in their own words, then I can say, well, I don't think you really, like, you didn't reflect, you didn't really do enough to like make sure that you're on the right track to learn this week. So then I nudge them a little bit, and I say, well, I noticed on your self-assessment this week, this and this and this. Or if I feel like they actually have learned a lot, I actually do send notes saying, like, I really loved what you wrote about this. And the students really get into it, because I had a student in my discrete math class this semester who's a teacher, and then we were like, well, she going to be a teacher, and she does some tutoring right now, but she she did something I've never thought in my life I would think about. But the whole less than is less than or is greater than, and the alligator and eating a sign, or eating your lunch or whatever it might be, they have that idea in their minds. But we were talking about the conjunction and disjunction. So she put her hands up in a, like a triangle up and a triangle down, and said, you know what, like, if I have to teach this as a teacher, I'm going to tell my students that they already know the left and right triangles for less than or greater than. So now these are just 2 more triangles up and down. And like this, I'm like, I mean, that's something I'm like, well, you know what? Like, you're not wrong, because it's really like something where if I see that they are making that sort of connection, and thinking about how they're going to actually use what I'm teaching them after they graduate, I'm like, well, that is great. So I am thrilled that the students love the self-assessments, and they feel like they're not high pressure. So they still have homework every week where and this is the other part of IBL, is that a lot of instructors who use IBL also use mastery learning. And so I allow the students to do the homework over and over and over and over again until they get 100% if they want to. And this summer, one lady, and I arbitrarily put 100 attempts as the maximum, but she reached attempt 100 and said, I really want to get 100%, but I'm locked out. And I thought you said I had unlimited attempts. Like, well, I don't know what to say, because I really felt like if you put in that much effort, try 100 times and you haven't given up, that's not the level of motivation I've ever seen in students before I tried IBL. So I'm absolutely thrilled by all that. So, all right. So yeah, I'm going to spell this last one out, and I'm trying to spell individual, so that's not good. So I just am going to put presentation. Student presentations is already up there, so good enough. Now, oh, by the way, I think it's I'm going to do this just because I feel like it's like funny that not that is kind of funny because it's so large, but I think my students absolutely don't like it when I number these, and then I didn't realize like I can just like not do that, but I didn't know that you can just go ahead and say like move the period somewhere else. And I don't know why I feel like that's something like I always get a kick out of that for whatever reason. So anyway, if I'm enjoying it, I feel like it's something where the students enjoy them as well. So a project definitely would be IBL, just to get back to that question, Jason. And honestly, in addition to my uh, like weekly self-assessments, I also have the students do a final project instead of a final exam. And so I do something similar for that project though. And I give them a choice of picking a topic related to the class and doing sort of research or that type of thing, or they can pick one question from each chapter that we talked about during the class and then explain what they did wrong initially on the problem, what they learned about the problem, what the correct answer is, how they would explain something so that somebody else might not make that mistake. And so the same deal here, that if they're picking the 6 questions and they're explaining the mistake they made and how they've learned and grew over the semester, then it's definitely not just 6 questions, 7, 8 questions that they could have come up with the answer with, but not actually indicate it to me in any way that they actually learned anything. I feel like a traditional final exam is like when in college I took a geometry class and we were told all of the answers in advance and then said, well, 8 out of these 500 proofs will be on the final exam. And then, well, you know what? I did not do well in that class because I felt like it was memorization, and it absolutely was. I could have gotten through it without memorization, but that's not how our instructor taught it. He didn't teach us all of the critical thinking and logic skills to be able to reproduce the proofs on our own without memorizing them. And so that's what I like about IBL, is that it allows the students to like foster those like critical thinking skills that they might not uh, like get otherwise. Oh, by the way, like speaking of field trips, Keith, I actually took one of my like developmental math classes to Kroger one time on a field trip. And so we went to Kroger, and then I gave them a a shopping list to go through, and then they had a budget, and then they had to go through and get everything on that list with the lowest average unit price per item. And so then they had to go and calculate all the unit prices. And some of them were coming back and telling me, you know what, that price per unit on the little tag in Kroger wasn't calculated correctly. And so they, I mean, and the even better part is I told them, you know, like if you bring coupons with you, I'll honor the coupons in the price of the how you total the groceries that you are getting. So I for some reason really felt like they really enjoyed that, and I love to do that more often. But you know, the struggle is real sometimes. So now let's see. I will. Uh-oh, where's the slide controls? Oh boy. So now then let me go back for a second because I don't know what just oh, that's where it is. I, I I'm trying to clear them and it won't let me. All right. So then oh yes, all right. Yeah, it's 10 minutes left, and that's perfectly fine because I just want to talk about the four pillars briefly. And so these are our rich mathematical task and regular opportunities for student to student and student to instructor collaboration, and instructors inquiring about student thinking and a focus on equity. So then with that being said, based off of all of the things we have sort of discussed here so far, I'm just wondering which of the four pillars is the most important to you. So if you wouldn't mind going ahead and just voting their pillar 1, 2, 3, 4. And so how did administration do with that idea of me going on field trips? You know what? They absolutely don't mind. I will say that I know I'm fortunate to get them to allow me to do crazy ideas, but also like another field trip I went on with students is for my math for teachers classes. I took them to a teaching supplies store, and then they did a demo of all of the math games in the store for the students. And then they actually were kind enough to give all of the students a game of their own to take home. And so that was just phenomenal. But if that doesn't work, I also one time got a store to come to the classroom. So, you know, if you can't take the students on the trip, bring the trip to you. That's that's one thing that I will say. And I I I think that with Zoom now and everything like that, I actually have a virtual guest speaker in one of my classes coming up next month. And I don't know who's more excited about it, me or the students. Like, I really want to hear this guy talk about expected value in my probability class and statistics class. So what can I say? Anyway, where are the responses? Oh, I don't know if you can see them, but I can see them. But all right, so a lot of you, like the majority of you who voted at least said pillar one. And so I will say that, just as a side note here, this is another representation of the four pillars. And so it's based off of the students' needs in a mathematical space and the students' needs in a social space. And so I know that there was a comment or question earlier about students who might have social anxiety and things like that. And that is exactly part of the four pillars, is that students need to have their needs met in the social space and feel comfortable in the classroom and interacting with the other students, interacting with the instructor, and they need to also be engaged in the mathematical space. And so you really can't have one without the other, at least in my opinion. I mean, unless you just say, well, you know what, like we're just gonna lock all of you in your own your own closet all semester, and then no social interaction. You won't know what's going on in the outside world. Then you can focus on mathematics only. Well, you know what's going to happen. They're going to want out of that closet within the first 45 minutes. So they're going to start missing that social interaction, and so they need both of those things. So just please, I would highly just recommend that you keep that in mind. Like, even though this deep engagement in rich mathematics is very, very important, these other things also are key as well. And then I do want to say, though, that slide was just, my intent was to get you to think about how things you already do in the classroom already, like group work or think, pair, share, whatever it might be, or projects, might actually relate to those four pillars. And so even if you're already doing some form of IBL, maybe your first or your next task moving forward would be like, well, I do something for pillars 1, 3, and 4 already. I need to try to incorporate one new technique into my teaching so that I cover all four of the pillars. So that is something to like really think about as well. And then if you are looking for reasons to give to your administration of or your colleagues of why IBL, there's lots of research here. And so I included some quotes in here that you can look up or read. But the last one thing about IBL that I want to point out is that you really see the most benefit when you realize, you know what, IBL really does foster a growth mindset and the idea of productive failure. And that's what I love about everything. So I already use the weekly self-assessments, and I do have some assignments where I don't have the students turn them in, but I say, well, we will be discussing that the first 10 minutes of the next class or something like that. So it's less pressure, but there's no right or wrong answer because it's not being collected. We're just talking and seeing what the misconceptions might be. And I'm very explicit about that and why I'm not giving quizzes and why I'm not giving a formal final exam. So if you're going to do any of these techniques or use IBL with your students, just make sure you're explicit about why and let them know up front, I'm trying something new, or or this is what I'm hoping that you will get out of this, or look for this thing while you're trying the activity or the lesson. And then there are some other ideas like using blogs, blog posts, videos to spread this idea of growth mindset throughout your entire semester. So here's a summary of everything that we talked about, but really, I think that when I ask things like what class or topic you think IBL would be the most helpful for and why, this was really the framework for what got me started with IBL. And that's why I suggested like just pick one topic or one class or one dry thing that you really don't like talking about as much, or you see students like falling asleep. You know, when I saw my students in my college algebra class one semester, when I was talking about transformation of graphs, and one student quietly said to me, like really timidly raised her hand and said, "Professor Oakes, I need to get your attention." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, what is it?" And she said, "Well, there's someone snoring in the back row." And when I realized like transformations of functions were so boring that students were snoring in the back row, I knew that college algebra was where I wanted to start. And so when I went to the AIBL workshop in Los Angeles, I was on a mission to redesign my whole college algebra class with IBL techniques. So think of a situation or a topic and go from there. So here are some tips for modifying materials, especially like rephrase as questions, use examples that inspire pattern recognitions, and ask for counter examples. But also though, I will give you this slide deck that has links to other resources and lots of them for classes, every class and by topic. And those are my citations for the slide deck. And so thank you very much. And I hope that you got something out of this.